Good afternoon, everyone online. Thank you very much for joining us today for our IUI Make It Make Sense series. I am Teresa Davis Lassiter, Program Manager for the Professional Development and Continuing Education Department in the Office of Community Engagement. We are happy to host, we're calling it our pilot series with this year where we're focusing on civic literacy and engagement. Where we're taking voter education to the next level. Voter registration to the next level, which is voter education. And this is a step in that direction in terms of understanding how the political party process works here in the United States. So we'll get started in a minute when I'll introduce our facilitator, but just wanted to get an idea of who is with us online. And Amanda, you are the person, so if you can unmute yourself and quickly introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling in from.
Sure. I'm Amanda Cecil. I'm a professor in the Department of Tourism, Events, and Sport Management in the School of Science. My interest in this course is I'm taking over a new course in the fall called Global Tourism Seminar, and I want to add a model about tourism and politics. And I think a lot of our students don't understand the importance of participating in the political process or how local and government regulation actually affects our industry. So my hope is to learn some things here that I could possibly implement into my new class. So thanks for hosting.
Great, thank you so much. And we have a few others that have just joined us. My name is Teresa Davis Lassiter, and I'm the Program Manager for Professional Development and Continuing Education. You haven't missed a thing. We're just going through some quick introductions just to see who is joining us today and why are you interested in this course. So, Jenny Morris, if you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Hi, Jenny.
Sorry, I just got audio working. Did you just ask me to introduce myself?
Yes, and your interest in this course, yes.
Okay. Jenny Morris, and I sorry I've missed anybody else who's introduced. I don't know what all people have said, but just have feel like I didn't pay as much attention to politics until probably around 2015, and then became like super interested in it, and just kind of looking for things to kind of fill in the gaps of things that I wish I had paid more attention to early on.
Great, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Tammy Smith, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you. I feel like I should have paid more attention in government class in high school. I just really am curious to hear what this is about and just learn a little more, just trying to educate myself, that's all.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome. I see someone is still trying to connect through audio, and I see Ann. I see a relative of Brooks. Why don't you introduce yourself? Ann or Mark?
Maybe she doesn't know.
You're on mute. If you could unmute and introduce yourself. Maybe they stepped away. And it's Mark that is coming in on the iPhone, still trying to connect to the iPhone. Yeah. Okay. And here in the room, let you introduce yourselves here in the room.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Teresa Bennett. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Community Engagement and really excited to learn more about this topic.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Branscombe. I'm a program coordinator and sponsorship coordinator here at the Office of Community Engagement. I'm very excited to learn a lot in this class.
Thank you. And without further ado, I am going to, and I should be looking at the camera here, so hello. I will introduce Dr. Brooks, who will be facilitating our discussion today.
Thank you, Teresa, and for the Office of Community Engagement and everyone working on, this whole, bigger project of increasing civic literacy and education here, you know, within the IU community and, you know, the folks around the county. I realize I should be looking at both the camera and as well as folks in the room, thankfully.
There are more of them, so feel free to.
Yeah.
No.
I've been teaching American politics courses and courses in political theory for about 6 years now. I started my PhD education at the University of Connecticut. I graduated this past spring, so but I have been teaching courses here at IUI, as it's called now. So without further delay, I will start the PowerPoint, and if there are any questions, please feel free to use the raise hand function, and hopefully you know, I will be aware of it, and I will try to answer your question the best I can. And basically with that, share my screen.
Brooks, can I ask real quick if this is being recorded?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And let's see, how does this? Well, let's see.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that the better?
There we
Okay.
have
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so yes, this is being recorded, so I just want to give a very quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to talk about the function of political parties and the role of the party organization, which is really important for how they operate kind of in a mechanistic way. And I also hopefully answer to your satisfaction the question that everyone wants to know: why do we have a two-party system in the United States? Because you know, the United States has a reputation as being one of the oldest constitutional democracies in the world, and if you technically you could technically say that we have more than one party in the United States. If you've ever voted, which I hope, or if this is going to be your first election, I hope you do register to vote. You will see not just Democrat and Republican, but you will see all these parties you probably haven't heard of when you get to the ballot box, and you'll be like, I've never heard of, you know, the American Independent Party or the Natural Law Party or the Green Party. So there are more than one party, political parties, but we do have a two-party system. So we are not a multi-party democracy as you might hear other countries described in the European Union or South Africa or other countries. So what's the main purpose of a political party? The main purpose of a political party is to contest elections. So free and open elections are kind of what makes a democracy a democracy. There's a famous quote by a political scientist whose name I cannot recall at the moment, but he said that you know, the American political system would not make sense or would not operate effectively except for the party system. So party organizations, the whole reason that they exist is to contest elections as effectively as they can. They want to get their people in office. That's the main difference between an interest group and a political party. You may have you know, seen advertisements with you know, a Democrat or Republican candidate, and you might have, if you recall, some of the ads on television or on your social media account might say, "The Citizens United for Protecting Children," which sounds great, right? Now even though they may have a picture of, you know, a Democrat or Republican, and they may say this candidate likes children or this candidate doesn't like children. You know, I'm just being silly because these groups do things like this. Now, that is a political ad. It's geared towards making voters think, oh, I want the candidate that likes children, right? Because everyone likes children and, you know, puppies and cats and all that stuff. So, but the interest group that pays for the ad is not trying to get its membership or its donors elected to office. The political party runs candidates to get in charge or to take control of the levers of government, so to speak. So there is a big difference between an interest group and a political party. I know with, you know, kind of like the pessimism we have, or at least as I'll show later with some data, the pessimism people have in political parties, they often conflate an interest group with a political party, but they're very different. The political party wants to put that person in office, whether that's for city councilor, school board member. Well, actually, school board members in Indiana are technically not partisan, but city councilor all the way up to governor or president. They want to put someone in that office to you know, execute what they have envisioned. And political parties also are important in that they promote responsiveness for that elected official. So if that elected official you know, fulfills the campaign promise, then the party and the candidate can take credit for it. Or if the official has not acted on, you know, protecting children and, you know, animals, you know, citizens will know that person has not fulfilled their campaign promise. So the party is an important element of the electoral system and our democracy because it promotes responsiveness. And alternative candidates serve competition. So for most general election races, you will see at least 2 candidates on the ballot for an office. This is more common for big offices like governor, president, senator, even in states that are so-called red states or blue states where Republicans or Democrats have a strong grip on power, you will still see, you know, an unknown Democrat or Republican candidate running for that Senate seat or that governorship. So alternative candidates are a big feature of the system. Obviously, if you're going to run for office, you need to be recruited to run for office. And so political parties are this vehicle for people to be recruited depending on their values and the beliefs. And this often begins in an individual's career at a local party level. And so sometimes what folks do if they want to, you know, eventually run for office one day, they have to volunteer for that party. So for example, although I have no desire to run for office myself, one thing I did when I was more active in the political party process myself is that, like, for one of the primary election periods, I volunteered to drive to be like a driver for you know, volunteers to the precinct places where they vote. And I also volunteered to pick up lunch orders and coffee drinks for the people who work inside the polling places, who you know, verify the voter registration, because both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, they have authorized you know, identification checkers inside the polling place where they verify your residency and to make sure you're at the right polling place. And after you have voted, in some places, they will check to make sure your ballot doesn't have any duplicate marks that could invalidate your vote and things like that. So I won't go into a whole lot of those details because you know, that's all very much an experiential process. I don't want to just describe, you know, like the installation process basically of voting. But anyway, so political party activity begins at the local level. And the local organizations reward service. To have the party behind you, you need to have support at the local level. and you need to build relationships in order to have that party's support to run for that seat. Another example, when I was working on a state legislative race, it was a contested primary before the general election. So the party endorsed candidate that I was working for had a competitor who decided to challenge her. And what I got to see was the political party here in Marion County said, we don't want this guy to be our representative on the ballot in November. So we're going to mail all these ads saying that this guy did this, did that, he's not trustworthy. And, you know, even if it has a marginal effect on, you know, because most people just, when they get those flyers in the mail, at least from my experience, I just throw them away. But even getting to a glimpse of the candidate's name or the candidate's picture, it will like, you know, activate some, you know, some memories and some, you know, that will hopefully, that people will exercise, you know, at the ballot box where they will choose the so-called party endorsed candidate and not the candidate who's challenging the party. And another thing that's very important is that, and that may seem kind of pretty self-evident, is that political parties provide a framework for voters to make choices. Voters are cued to party perspectives whether they realize it or not in terms of their values and their beliefs. And so without even knowing the name of the candidate, if you just see a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, you know, or whatever, you will immediately associate in your mind with, you know, some popular positions that the Democrats or Republicans are known for. And so, oh, I forgot to hit the clicker thing there. And so party labels offer voters an efficient shortcut mechanism for choosing among competing options and for kind of aligning their values with their votes, you know? And so parties want to, they want you to have a feeling of attachment to them, which is hopefully for their perspective positive. You know, political parties want to put people in office, so they want you to have good feelings of attachment to them. But that, you know, depending on your perspective, it's pretty, you know, effective. So for example, I have here in this figure on the screen here that shows that the percentage of voters who say they plan to vote for, you know, a straight ticket for the presidential and House representative races, that 78% of voters, according to the Pew Research Center, 78% of voters will choose either a Democrat or Republican. And the data is slightly higher for the Senate candidates. So the percent of registered voters in the 34 states with Senate elections say they plan to vote a straight ticket in the presidential and Senate races. That's 80% and 78%. And so if you notice, those who split their Republican or Democratic choices or use an other split or who refuse to answer the question, that's a very small, you know, I mean, there's still millions of voters, but it's still relatively pretty small. And so the political parties need to identify that slice, that small slice of voters who vote Republican or Democrat, or who say that they won't answer the question. They want to try to convince them to say that they will support their candidate. And this form of party identification has been an important part of political science research on parties since the 1960s. And in fact, there's a book called The American Voter that was published in 1960 that really kind of kickstarted this whole focus on voters in political science. And so political parties need to not just identify the people who will vote for them, the so-called straight ticket voters who will vote all Republican, all Democrat. They also, they need to figure out who's up for grabs, you know, who's persuadable. And that's a very small percentage. And so this is where targeting becomes very important. And so this is important because, even if you have billions of dollars, even if you have, the wealth of Elon Musk or another billionaire, you can't spend your time just talking to every voter. So you need to find those voters who vote regularly and who have a habit sometimes of voting in one, the Democratic primary or the Republican primary. And you need to find out kind of like if they are persuadable for your campaign. And so it doesn't make sense to just talk to people who already agree with you or people who violently sometimes disagree with you, because when either of those scenarios, you're wasting your time just kind of listening to the choir, or you're just going to become frustrated. And once people start voting one way or the other, it's usually very hard to change that person's opinion, absent some massive event that could reshape their partisan identification. So you need to find that slice, that small slice of voters. Sometimes it's as small as 4% as for the voters who split their tickets according to the data for Republican and Democrat. And this other point I have up here about party or membership through voter registration. So one of the quickest ways political parties can get people to affiliate with them is through voter registration, because when you register to vote, you can opt in to select, the Democrat, the Republican, or another party or no party when you register to vote. And so that's why membership through voter registration is kind of, it's not very exciting, but that's where a lot of the parties get their membership data. Which is held by the Secretary of State. But anyway, what I wanted to show you in contrast. So I want you to help me with this kind of funny factoid. Well, as you saw previously, 78% vote straight ticket for the House of Representative race and the Republican race, and 80% vote straight ticket for the Senate race and the presidential race. So that's, well over a majority of voters, 75% or more. But this is kind of funny too, because the same research center, the Pew Research Center, illustrates that the Americans' views of both major parties is now more unfavorable than favorable. So 61% of voters have an unfavorable view of the Republican Party. 60% of voters have an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. And you can see, if you want to, dig into the, trend line here, starting in '94, like both the political parties, 50% for the Democrats, 66% for the Republicans, they had favorability ratings. So their favorability ratings have tanked, and their unfavorability ratings have gone up. Yet, I'll go back to this graph again. 78% of voters who voted for the House and the House candidate and the Republican and the presidential candidate, or the Senate candidate and the Democratic or presidential candidate, they still selected one of the two parties. So something is it's kind of maddening in the sense that there's this conflicting data of people continually voting for, one of the two parties, yet, 2/3 of voters don't like either of the parties. So help us make sense of that. I don't know. I don't know if you can.
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense. Well, in part, it's, people's behaviors, like even if they may not like the party, they just don't. And I think let me see what time. I'm gonna jump to some of the technical features of the election process and.
Question.
Oh, okay. Hey, Amanda.
Quick, what are the factors that go into unfavorable and favorable? Are those policy issues? Are those candidate likability issues? What are the factors driving that metric?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at all the details of like what made that metric, you know, unfavorable versus favorable. But it probably has to do with who leads the two parties. You know, like up until recently, Joe Biden was the leader of the Democratic Party. I mean, he still technically is, he's the president, but his unfavorability ratings have been very high the last couple of years. Same with the former president, former President Trump. So I haven't dug into kind of all of the questions that were asked, but I mean, I can guess that it's a little bit of who's at the top of the ticket, who represents the party. Is, you know, if that person has a high unfavorability among voters, they will also have an unfavorable, you know, view of that candidate's party. But that's a good question, and I will dig into that, and you know, I can email you later with some of the.
Yeah, I'm just curious if it's an individual with the party or if it's really the party in general as it relates to some of their values and policies that they kind of typically stand for, and how that's shifted over time.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have like a definitive answer at this point. Okay. And I also had a point that I could talk to you about tourism. A good book I could recommend. Completely unrelated, or somewhat unrelated, I think. So the technical features of elections. So if you want to know why all the states kind of have different rules and regulations regarding who can vote, whether or not you need an ID, how you register to vote, it's different from state to state. Why is that? Well, as I tell my students, if you ever have a question about why is there only 2 people in the Senate? Why, or you know, why do we have electoral college? Go to the Constitution. Article 1, Section 4 says the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by that state legislature. So that's why each state runs their elections a little differently than others. And so why do we have 2 parties? In part, well, a couple of reasons. We have what are called single member districts. So that means a bunch of people are running for one job. Okay. So unlike in a parliamentary system where everything is proportional, where depending on the size of the population, you could have, you know, 2 representatives or 5 representatives for a, you know, district or, you know, a national legislature. In the United States, it's single member districts. And in almost all cases for the House of Representatives, those single member districts are decided based on a plurality. So that means that, you know, if there are 4 candidates running for office, and the winning candidate doesn't need 50% of the vote to win. They just need the most votes. So you just need the most votes to win. Now, this varies somewhat for Senate elections, but for the House of Representatives, it's single member districts. And so, take this hypothetical example of, you know, a single member district. Let's say 60% of the people in the district, they vote for the Democrat, and 40% vote for the Republican. So what does that mean? That means the Democrat wins. Even though there's 40% of the people in that district that voted Republican, in our system, they don't get anything. Whereas if this district were in, like, let's say a 5-member district, according to proportional representation, that would mean that if 60% voted Democrat, 40% Republican, that means that the Democrats would get 3 people and the Republicans would get 2. So everyone gets something. Now, so this is one of the reasons why we have a two-party system, because voters do not want to risk, voting for a candidate who will not win. And so even if there are all these other third parties or minor parties who a voter may agree with, they may say, well, I really like this libertarian's idea of no income tax, but the Republican Party already is kind of on that same wavelength with me, so I'm just gonna vote for the Republican. And so the libertarian is left in, out in the cold. And, the same thing could be said for the Democrats. Like someone may really like the Green Party candidate's, position on, banning and stopping all oil drilling in the United States. But the Democratic Party is close enough to the Green Party that they will just vote for the Democratic candidate because they don't want to waste their vote. So the winner-take-all system promotes the two-party system and prevents small parties from achieving even minimal representation in the national legislature. And there's also laws and regulations at the federal level that reward and punish, reward the big parties and punish the two parties or the small parties. So in order to qualify for matching federal funds for your campaign, candidates must demonstrate a minimum level of support in prior elections or a primary election. And the lack of history and public interest in third-party elections precludes most from receiving federal or state funding in these elections. And so because of the way the system is set up, we're left with, instead of a much more colorful map that reflects reality, it's a mix of blue and red, we get these maps. This is the battleground states for 2024. So the Electoral College votes are based on the number of representatives in the House plus the number of senators. And so since all states have 2 senators per the Constitution, and all states are guaranteed at least 1 representative in the House, you see variation across the board in terms of how many electoral votes states have. And in most congressional and because most congressional elections are based on a plurality vote, as I said, the candidates with the most votes wins. And in order to win the presidency, a candidate must obtain a majority of the Electoral College votes, and not simply a plurality. So that's in contrast to House elections. And so let's take a look at Indiana's most recent presidential election results, which I'm sure we all are all familiar with. We know that Donald Trump got, he won, but by how much did he win? He won by 487,103 votes. That's a lot. And although Indiana is a red state, a lot of voters did choose Joe Biden, who won, over, 1,242,413 votes. So if our Electoral College votes had been awarded proportionally, Trump still would have won. He would have won 6 votes, but Joe Biden would have won 5. So it would have actually reflected the competitiveness of the election, as we saw in other states like Pennsylvania, Arizona. Although it was much more contested in Pennsylvania and Arizona than it was in Indiana, it still would have made a difference in if Indiana was a so-called strong Republican state. But that rule change that would be required would be so the state legislature would have to pass a law awarding its electoral votes proportionally, and the Republican Party, just like the Democratic Party in California or Illinois, they don't really want to give up those votes. So it's really against their interest to say, let's be more fair just because we want to be more fair. It just doesn't make any sense from like a zero-sum game perspective. But for most voters, I think, who are not in the party system, they might have, a different perspective on that. So as I mentioned, I've mentioned third parties. So this person up here is Millard Fillmore. He was the last non-Democrat or Republican person to ever be elected president, and that was in 1850. So political parties do contest elections. Sometimes they win, but usually, in the way our elections are structured, unless you establish that you can win and can convince voters to change their habits and stuff, you're not going to have much of an impact beyond an election or two. So the last time actually that a third party won votes in the Electoral College was 1968. And that was when George Wallace ran as a third party candidate against Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. Sorry, the loser. Often you forget who the loser is. Yeah, in 1968, George Wallace won the states of Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi. That was the last time any presidential candidate, other than Democrat or Republican, has won Electoral College votes. And those votes most likely had cost Hubert Humphrey the election, because all those states that I just mentioned in the South had been reliably Democratic states up until Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. So those voters, enough of those voters were upset, about that, so they switched to George Wallace's segregationist party. And so that is a big obstacle that third parties face. But they're still around. I think for governor this year in Indiana, for example, there's a libertarian candidate running, and there's a third party candidate running for president too. So despite their limited success in winning government positions, the third parties often have substantial influence on the outcome of elections. Sometimes third party candidates can get enough votes that it could, like I said, cost a candidate an election. Some analysts say back in 2000, Al Gore lost the presidency because Ralph Nader won enough votes in Florida from, enough Democrats who were dissatisfied with Al Gore that cost him the election. And one thing that I don't have, depending on if anyone has a question about it, one choice that we have as an alternative is ranked choice voting. And this is implemented in some big cities across the country, like in New York City, for example. They just started this. But San Francisco and Oakland, they've been using ranked choice voting to elect mayors and other offices for about 14 years now. So instead of just choosing one or the other, what a voter would do for a ranked choice system is they would list all the candidates that they like from first to last. And if during the first round of vote counting, the first place or the person at the top does not win, then the second choice comes into consideration, and then the third choice if it gets to that. So it's more complicated in terms of counting, but it is an alternative to what we have now. It just takes more effort and a little bit more resources. So it's kind of, especially for people who want to know the results the night of the election, it could be kind of irritating. Because I think in the case of Oakland, for example, the first time they used this ranked choice voting to elect the mayor of Oakland, it took them 9 different ballot counts to arrive at that conclusion. So for the old party types who want to know who won, was it the Democrat or Republican, or who won the, you know, the race? It, you know, it was kind of frustrating because it took, you know, longer than a few hours to count all those ballots because people had ranked, you know, Don Parada, Jean Quan, all these other candidates for office, and it took 9 counts of ballots for Jean Quan to win the office. So it's complicated. It's not perfect, but I think you could make a pretty good argument that, you know, and I think if everyday voters heard about this system or this alternative way of counting votes, you know, they wouldn't feel as if they were wasting their vote. If they said, okay, I want to, you know, list the Republican and the Libertarian candidate. And, you know, maybe the Libertarian candidate might win, you know, it's if enough people, you know, voted for that candidate, according to this, you know, ballot counting style, that candidate could win, you know. I want to pivot now to the activity that I planned. And I know that the folks online also have a copy of the handout sheet. So the activity is that there are 3 alternative parties to the Democrats and Republicans. And so what I want you to do is to write a political party platform for one of the parties that you whichever one you want to choose. And you want to target your base, but you also want to appeal to the general voter. So the 5 main issues that we're confronting in this scenario are the role of our artificial intelligence in the economy, the growing income inequality and disparities in funding for public education. 2/3 of voters say they don't like the way the country is, you know, they don't like the direction of the country. But we have strong economic growth and low employment, and we're also confronting climate change. So pick one of the 3 parties below, and keep in mind the demographics of who they normally attract, but think of ways you could try to pivot and create a more general party platform for one of these parties to appeal to, you know, the general voter who may not know anything about that party and is interested in voting for someone or for another party besides the Democrats or the Republican. So I'll leave you to that. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
There are some folks on the line who did not receive it when I sent it out originally, and I'm sending it to you now, the class activity.
So doesn't Georgia have a different system? You just don't get to win, lose, you have to win by a certain amount?
Yeah, in the state of Georgia, especially, I don't know, I can't remember if it's for the House.
No, it happened for the House most recently.
Oh, yeah, that's
Had to
right.
go back and.
Well, the Senate seat, the Senate races in Georgia, for the Senate seat in Georgia, it requires a 50% majority. So, or 50% plus 1, technically.
Right.
So the winner has to get 50% plus 1. And so if in the first round of elections, only a candidate only gets 47%, the next candidate gets, you know, 30 whatever, and there are some other lower vote getters, those who vote, the people at the very bottom get knocked off, and the 2 top vote getters go to a runoff election. So that's a separate system from ranked choice voting, but it is an alternative that's used in Georgia and other states too. I don't think Indiana uses that for any election, but so if you know, just Google, like, you could like spend, you know, the rest of your life looking up all the different election rules that states and municipalities have for very, you know, obscure offices, because I think you know, like in some, you know, some other cities across the country, they use runoff voting for some offices, but it's not very common, and it's definitely not used for, you know, House candidates and for most Senate seats. And one of the reasons why is because we have a federal system, so you know, states are very hesitant to get another mandate from the federal government to say, you must do this, you must do that. That's a whole nother debate over like the role of the federal government and states, and it's basically, you know, we haven't solved that. You know, ever since the first revolutions, you know,
Seems pretty close to ranked choice in that after it's but easier in that the lower ones are out
right.
and now the upper ones who we all know who they're gonna be, but nonetheless, it gets close to that, but without having to have 9 ballots.
Yeah, it's a good argument for I think it's a good argument for you know, having a runoff for almost all elections, but implementing that would take the will of the states. And the only way that will change is if enough people mobilize and start flooding the legislative offices with phone calls, emails, you know, going to the state capitol and saying, do this now, or otherwise they're not gonna change.
Isn't Rand Paul a libertarian?
Technically, I think that's what he identifies with.
But he runs.
He runs as a Republican.
So then that's why the electoral college votes still have never gone to someone of the third party, because they declare something different than they ultimately say they are. Okay.
Yep. back to presentation.
Hmm?
Presentation.
Oh, presentation.
What platform you're just suggesting, what would I care about?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what would make that voter,
Right.
like interested, you know, like you may not know what that voter cares about, but like.
Right.
What would you suggest the party use to try to persuade someone who's not already you know, on board with that party?
So it's interesting because I looked up pre-Kamala Harris, the Democrats' party platform, and it spends just as much time saying what Donald Trump is doing poorly as it does to say what they will do, which I find fascinating. They don't, that shouldn't be equal time. It doesn't feel like it should be equal time. So to your assignment here, you know, the idea that I would say we've had enough taxes and people are, you know, fed up and struggling and things like that. And then I would turn around and say, but the other guy's gonna make it worse. I mean, that doesn't feel like a platform.
Well, yeah, I would be interested to see if like there's a survey of how many people have actually read a party platform, which, you know, it's usually targeted towards the party faithful who come to the conventions. But like the basis of like what the party does in terms of like how they message their, you know, their candidates and stuff, like it relies on like these general principles that both Democrats and Republicans, you know, use to, you know, create a you know, general statement of principles and
Right.
and you know,
And that's what I find, so you're right, I hadn't read this platform, so I pull that up. And if I'm meant to be getting the 4%,
mhm.
it's spending more time talking to people who already agree with me, sort of feels like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Not getting the 4%, it's not creating affinity.
No.
So,
It'll be interesting to see what the Democrats end up adopting, because their revised party platform hasn't been officially adopted. It's still in the draft stages because the convention is where the party platform is formally adopted, and then when that happens, you'll hopefully there will be a more articulate and nuanced you know, pitch to voters besides, you know, being opposed to former presidents.
not, because I suspect if I read the Republicans, it's exactly the same, but opposite. It's not just the Democrats saying, we're great, but he's terrible. They're gonna say, we're great, but she's terrible.
Yeah,
It just feels like a platform ought to be like, who am I and what am I going to do? Period, done. Not,
mhm.
and then your advertising is where you call out that.
Right.
So anyway, I'm having a hard time with your assignment.
Well, Jean, it's like she has.
Oh, good, we've got one. Okay, I killed enough time. You concentrate on that person. Oh, I like it, yeah. Well written,
Yeah, that's
it's well written.
yeah, that's reminiscent of what the Occupy protesters, you know, 12, 13 years ago were really emphasizing with, you know, just the inequality of wealth in the United States.
And is that what ChatGPT wrote?
I guess that I guess so I guess you can do it.
Good job, Jenny.
Jenny, can you confirm that?
Yeah, I'd love to take credit, but I was like, what does a platform think? And so I typed in and basically just prompted it asking like, if I was focused on abolishing billionaires, and then I put in like, and my key demographic was this particular group. Yeah, but I'm not gonna lie, that was exactly verbatim what it had come up with, but I saw it and I was like, oh yes, exactly what I'm looking for. So, and I was looking at the other parties and thinking, for the like taxed enough already, I feel like it kind of, especially if it was like, hey, this wouldn't be increasing taxes on the vast majority of people. It would really just be looking at the people who were at the very top. So I feel like a case could be made for that group that is not like in the primary group population. And then for the technocratic, I thought that one might be a little bit trickier because it talks about consisting of wealthy individuals, but also, I mean, this probably is just going to be very telling about like my personal viewpoints with things, but even how like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and how they talked about like, really we're talking about like the absolute wealthiest people, the fact that there shouldn't be, 20 people in the United States with more wealth than like countries. So basically just kind of making the case that this is not going to impact, but really just the people who are making an incredible amount of wealth.
Anybody else looking at ChatGPT? You did? You got something? What do you have?
I'm actually for the technocratic party. And I guess you have to really look at how you define wealth, or the wealth bracket or whatever like that. Looked at it and it's basically saying, it's evidence-based platform, and of course we all know that in the near future and now in the near future, everything is going to AI. So this platform is geared towards educating individuals and creating jobs for the near future for individuals with ChatGPT. It's not created to do away with so many jobs, but to create other technology-driven jobs and things of that nature. Also, education for the future for individuals that are at school age. Like my daughter, she's 14 in the 9th grade. They're really driving home on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, because that is the way of the future now. So we go through droves if you look at history, industrial age, and all that other type of stuff. So if you want to be in the midst of all the wealthy individuals, you have to be able to recreate yourself and move with the time. Also efficient public administration, sustainable development, and just the technology and to be able to solve societal changes, research and AI, and support startups.
And that's the technocratic part.
Yeah.
How do you think you'll create affinity with women? Since it's majority male right now.
I think it's going to open up the doors for women, especially when things driving home with this STEM, because like I just mentioned with my daughter, she's in a lot of programs with AKA's Rosebuds. They are opening up different platforms for the women to look into male-dominated areas. So I think it's going to be an excellent platform for them to be able to think outside the box and get out of their comfort zone. In regards to, since you're a girl, you have to be a teacher or a nurse or something like that. So now they're using the younger individuals with the technology, because I don't know about you, I know I have like 5 grandbabies, they're like 2 and 3, and they can work that iPad like it's nothing.
That's right.
So that's what we're going into, and in order for you to be successful in that wealthy bracket, whatever that may mean, they didn't have a dollar amount on that. You can be wealthy and making $40,000 a year as opposed to somebody making $100,000 a year. But if they're not mentally savvy and being able to utilize their money in order to be able to take care of themselves, this person here that's making less could be actually making more than that person.
Well, we were really excited, just as a sidebar. I use last enrollment count in the technology related fields. We have more enrollments of women than men for the first time ever. When you put the entire IU enrollment together, some campus, it was more men than women. Indianapolis, more women than men.
That's because they're really driving home on the younger individuals that's coming up now into that STEM. They have all different types of programs.
Anyone else on the line want to share your platform?
Change the world.
I also looked at the Abolish Billionaires Party. I thought it was kind of aligned to where I was and where my students are mostly. I think maybe that's an assumption, but this educated Gen X kind of demographic that's really diverse, and they understand the impact of AI, and they also kind of believe in climate change because that demographic tends to match that. So those two issues really align. And I would say really focusing on the platform around inequality and disparity regarding funding, regarding taxes, regarding all the issues, again, as they're thinking about going into full-time employment. I think that would really matter. And also I think that they're interested obviously in strong economic growth and low unemployment because they're seeking employment or they're seeking kind of promotion. So I think there's a lot of messaging around that platform that can really expand the party, and also could make it one of the more diverse options moving forward. But my worry about this group too is that they really don't value voting. And I wonder how we can change this kind of perception that voting doesn't matter or isn't important or isn't a responsibility with this next gen group who really just kind of turn their nose up at the process at times. And I'm just curious if anybody has ideas around that, because as I think this is the most interesting of the three for me, it's also the most challenging group to get to the polls.
So it's interesting, Amanda, that this last election period, Indiana has an abysmal record for voting. However, on the IU campus, the students were like, I want to say 80% voted. So it likely has something to do with information, but it more likely has something to do with education. And back to what you're saying, more people that are educated, the more they realize what their role is in all of this, I think.
And if they believe.
And if they believe it will matter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because a lot of times too, I'm just speaking to other individuals, they're like, well, with all of this AI and all this other type of stuff, they can pretty much just sway.
Oh, they're starting to believe that it doesn't work.
Right, it doesn't work.
The system doesn't work.
And so, so many things that if you look at YouTube and you're seeing individuals, I just say like the Diddy case, example is something. So you had all these things that's going on and people are watching this stuff. And it's like, is this true or is it not true? You know what I mean? Right. So I think that's where it's coming from. Technology could be great when it's used correctly, but when it's not, then it's like, it just goes up in the air. Like, yeah. So I think just by speaking to other folks, even the folks that I deal with or in my circle, it's almost like, will it really matter? And then also, I can go really deep into it in regards to history and all that other type of stuff for going, but especially with the Black and brown people down to
I'd like to think that, and I'll put myself in this group, when my generation, our time is about up for this. And the new candidates are going to look more like your children, my children. If they better, they're gonna be younger. And so I would hope that would energize younger people, and I hope more diverse people to say, okay, it's not all old white guys anymore. It's these other people, and they look like me and they think like me, and if I don't always agree with them, they still look and think like me. So I guess that's my hope.
It may, but in the
I
same.
mean, they will age out, they have to, we will age out.
But the thing is, as we all know, it's a business, it's an
It is a
organization,
business,
you
you're
know,
right.
and whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. They can stop it, they can continue it.
Yeah.
And the president is just the fall guy, basically, you know,
I agree.
so.
Yeah.
I think with all the technology and all the information that is at your fingertips, folks are now starting to read more about history of the United States,
Good.
as opposed to how it was before when I was going to school. We only read about and knew about this, but to really go back,
Right.
many,
Start to accept what you should.
it starts to open up your eyes, and they call it the woke stage,
Yeah.
being woke.
And they use it as a negative, but it
It's like-
also means getting,
Somebody's
Wise.
reality.
it's a reality.
Yeah, and that is, it's just been educated, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm wanting to come here.
Mhm.
So just really kind of, I'm open, like an open book.
Yeah.
And a sponge into, understanding more the United States history and also all other countries'
Yes,
history. And what I've found is a lot of countries, I just say Africa, visited there many times. They know more about the US than
and they
folks
do.
that are here.
I'd be surprised.
Yeah. So
Good conversation, thank you for bringing a lot into this.
absolutely.
Well, I hope this exercise was, at least got you thinking about kind of like how to, take some, or to like message to, people who may not already agree with you, like what are kind of like some things you would want them to be persuaded by in order to at least consider supporting like one of these alternative parties to the dominant, Republican or Democratic choice. And thank you for stopping by and spending some time with us. And thank you so much to Teresa and Office of Community Engagement and everyone through IU here. It's I love doing this. If like I could, if I didn't have to worry about money, I would do this. I would have free class. I would just do things like this at the local libraries. I would, that's what I would do. Cause I just love listening and, talking to people about stuff and yeah.
Thank you. This
Yeah,
was really helpful to get us thinking, and it is, and I also think it was valuable to realize how difficult it is to get this information out.
Yeah. So, piggybacking on, Dr. Bruce's closing, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us today. Thank you all so much for participating, and he also kind of gave segue to our next topic in our IUI's Make It Make Sense series, the psychology of voting. So that will be held on September 9th, and I will send out the registration link for that. And we would love for you to attend that session as well, continuing in the spirit of taking voter registration to the next level, which is voter education. Please tell 2 friends, have them to tell 2 friends, and we would love for you to be part of that discussion, which will be held by, will be facilitated by another outstanding IUI faculty member, Dr. Aaron Dussault. So with that, thank you all so much. Be on the lookout for an evaluation. We would love your feedback, especially with this being our pilot series. So thank you all so much, and you all have a wonderful rest of the week.
Yeah,
Oh,
You
Amanda,
too, thank you.
Amanda?
Amanda had a quick suggestion.